understand that we're not done yet. Still a food drive if you have not donated. I didn't get an update. I emailed Charlene this morning from the Larimer County Food Bank. But you got an update on Friday. We're sitting pretty over 6,000 pounds. To get more than 25x credit points, hopefully we make it to not pounds. I'm used to weighing this stuff, $7,000. If we get there, then it'll be 30 or 35 points of extra credit. Pretty much we should all be ready to go with anything. I will leave it open for just a couple seconds here. Does anybody have any questions? As I don't want to just assume that there's no questions. Someone's watching over your shoulder there, Juliana, to be an adult of some sort. What's up?
It's my dad.
Yes, this is Juliana's favorite class, so just thought I'd put that out there right away. Haven't heard anything yet, but I'm assuming. All right, everybody. Is there any old business? No more old business? Parents are hilarious. I love that. That's great. Anyway, I can embarrass my sons. I do. Let me see. Okay, no? All right, well, I'm just going to dig back into this lecture today. But let's look at some questions first, because now we've had plenty of time for people to respond. And let me just switch over here to Top Hat. Okay. Oh, yeah. All right. So going to back it up a little bit and just get some ideas out here. I like this one because it really lets us know sort of where we're at in a way. And that would be, when thinking of our natural world, please type in a word that comes to mind. Beautiful, 5. Green, 3. Endangered, peaceful, damaged, chaotic, disaster, scarce, environmentalism, unapologetic, cycle, nature, ruined, clean, earth, pollutants, taken for granted, the non-man-made aspects. Oh my gosh, I got another robot offer. I swear somebody's typing in robot answers. Here we go. Let me read this in the robot voice. The non-man-made aspects of the world has to offer. Good. All right. I kind of appreciate that. I wish maybe every semester somebody would just give robot answers. Now, got to think for next semester. Dying people under attack, crazy. Dying people under attack, crazy. Ignored, natural parks, trees, unprotected, depleting, forests, whole. I like that. Toxic, neglected beauty. That's the name of my next single that I'll be releasing. Polluted, tree, home, disappearing. Okay, good. We're going to talk a little bit today about why we have concerns about the state of our natural world. I'm going to try and be more solution-oriented. Like I said, we've got a lot to get through. We don't really have a lot to get through. You can watch the lecture that I sort of did for nobody this summer in my son's room. He's got some good editing, some music, some elevator music on the intros and outros. So if I don't get to everything today, then, you're already hooked up. So let's look at this. What are some concerns with our natural world? Global warming, number 1. Climate change, number 2. Global warming, extinction, wildfires, pollution. People who think there's nothing wrong. There you go. Climate change, biodiversity loss, habitat being destroyed, physical destruction of national environment, species loss, climate change, species extinction, humans and their pollution, unhealthy environment, pandemic, inequality, deteriorating environment, pollution and exploitation, health and preservation, greenhouse gases, big corporations, misunderstanding, denial of climate change, crowded. Our natural world is dangerous to the environment due to the fact that there's no natural predators to stop our overconsumption of resources. That's where aliens come in. We'll get to that later. Greenhouse gases changing fast. Climate change, urbanization, dying. Some people don't seem to care. Rising sea levels, warming oceans, deforestation, fires, deforestation, pollution, 6th mass extinction, the lack of unity and care, mutations, climate change, pollution, deforestation, air quality. All right, whew. Just gonna stop there, cool myself off here for a minute. All right, it's intense. We know that. All right, so let's get back to this question here. That was where I had the cow, the cute little cow looking up over the other cows. The question is, would you be willing to eat less meat in order to slow global warming / climate change and slow stress on the environment? Now, okay, here's where we came in. And 30 would half their meat. Think about that. That's quite a bit, right? 30 out of the 54 answers would half their meat consumption. 17 would stop eating meat altogether. 2 people out of all that, meat. Nope. And 5 people, meat is gross already there. All right, 30 would half as much. 17, which is half of that, would stop eating it altogether. Make some observations. This list has changed dramatically over the last 8 or so years of me asking this question. Make some observations.
Well, my question is, when did you start incorporating Food Inc. into the things we have to watch?
For this semester, you mean?
Yeah, like when did that like start becoming like a part of your like normal like run of like things social kids watch?
Oh, I don't know, a long time ago.
Okay.
But the thing that I love even more than that we didn't get a chance to watch this semester is Jiro Dreams of Sushi. If you have never had a chance to see Jiro Dreams of Sushi, it is an inspiring food piece, an inspiring cultural piece, an inspiring piece about the environment. Man, it's one of my favorite films. That being said, Food Inc. is an old standby. I think Michael Pollan is a great guy who's continued to work at that. We didn't get a chance this semester to watch The Biggest Little Farm, which is another amazing piece. And you know, Food Inc. is, I like it because it's important. That being said, I think there's some inspiring stuff that maybe isn't quite as heavy-handed. Forks over knife. There's so many, really, there are so many over the last 10 years, which is there's our observation about food right there and how much food knowledge and awareness we have of connecting to the environment and stuff like that. That's just how many pieces have come out in the last decade about that very thing. Yeah, I mean, I think it's critical, but I don't know. There's so many other social things, like just documentary pieces that I think are critical for our understanding. But yeah. So make some observations. 30 people willing to eat half as much, 17 willing to cut it out altogether. What do you think?
I am shocked by these numbers. I don't know if anybody else was as shocked as I was, but me being from Texas, barbecue, I cannot believe that people love like their environment enough to stop eating meat. Like, good for you, support the environment. Couldn't be me ever. Like, literally, I'd rather like recycle and I don't know, have a compost and stuff, but like, no, you'll never see me stop eating meat. Good job, y'all who will.
Apparently, don't mess with y'all's barbecue.
Absolutely not.
Don't mess with Texas. No, that doesn't surprise me geographically. It makes a ton of sense, obviously. Yeah. Other observations. Anybody got a quick one?
Yeah, kind of just to second what Lily said. I was also surprised at the amount of people that were willing to give up meat, which, yeah, just like Lily said, good for you guys.
Yeah.
Me personally, I wouldn't, just because I'd eaten it all my life, and I like a lot of the food I eat, like it has meat in it. It had, like, I love having meat, vegetables, and like potatoes. That's like my favorite 3 combo right there.
For sure. Excellent. Good. Hey, good. And you know what? Like, I have seen a dramatic uptick in the amount of people even willing to like consider halving the meat. I mean, this is not a practical question. Nobody's actually doing it. But over 8 years, it basically has gone from like students grabbing torches and like, you know, gonna throw stuff at me and stuff like that to like, yeah. And then now the number of people willing to just forsake meat altogether, now that number has gone up dramatically as well. I mean, that's at least in concept, right? Not necessarily in practice. Good. Any other observations from this? All right. Let me move on to the next one. This is the big deal. Okay, two of these here. Are humans partially responsible for climate change or global warming? 52 yes, and 2 people got it wrong. And they answered no. Now, I don't say that very often. You know I don't say that very often. Yes, humans are partially responsible for climate change. We are more than partially responsible. And of course, a lot of the arguments are, this is just too big of a world for human beings to make such a big impact. Look, there's 7 billion of us. Some of us are dumping billions of tons of whatever that is into our water, into our air, so absolutely. human beings are a big driver of this. We can go back and do ice samples and CO2 and look at that 400, 500, 600,000 years past. And although to a certain degree, we could look at like ice ages or mass extinctions as cyclical, we know we have a responsibility. So unlike many questions, that's a right or wrong. And now, here's the big question right here. This is the ultimate question, in fact. And the ultimate question is, do you feel like fixing, yes, Downing put quotes on that again, that's right. Do you feel like fixing the environment is definitely possible, maybe in my lifetime, or impossible, or D, which I assume is like, no. Right? I'm fine with that too. What we got going on here is 24 people, yes, 28 people, maybe, 1 impossible, and 1 meditating on this. I think this is particularly important. So before we do anything else, we touched on this briefly last Friday, but what do you think? Why is this so important? Or what do these numbers tell you? Or why is Jason so excited about half the class saying maybe?
Oh, my bad.
I was just gonna say that I think like it's totally doable. I remember seeing, I might be wrong, but I remember seeing somewhere in my classes that with like a plan, there is totally a doable way to like go back on things that we have done, especially if we put more regulations in and the oil industries and all that. It's totally doable. So it just takes a lot of effort, but we just all got to be up for it.
Yeah, we're still not past the tipping point, although, 2 weeks past the tipping point, we'll be like, hey, we still got time. I'm being cynical, of course, but yeah, there are a lot of things that we can do. So yes, okay, good. Why else did you answer the way that you answered, or why is this such a big question?
I want to say I said impossible. And for this reason, my only reason is that it's not, now don't yell at me for this one.
Hold on,
but,
hold on. Usually when somebody is drastically outnumbered, I never hear from these people, but it's the more sociological interesting thing to hear from the one person that said impossible. So don't worry about it. Plus, nobody's probably within 6
I say impossible, and this might be a little bit politically incorrect, but most of the pollution in especially all of our bodies of water do not come from the United States. The United States is actually very, very advanced when it comes to dealing with our trash and other types of pollution. It's really the like third world countries who don't give a fuck and just throw their shit into the rivers.
All right.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Like it's really not us.
Where
So,
where
I
are
say
you getting that
impossible just
information?
because-
I'm just curious. I'd like to know. I'm not like mad.
It's mostly documentaries and doing my research on how the United States handles their like
Right. Well, so okay. So first of all, what I was
trash,
saying,
and pretty successful.
oh, sorry. You were lagging for just a second. Sorry about that. So yeah. Okay. Important distinction here, right? Obviously, the United States is very poor in participating in global treaties and policies. We are excellent, however, at infrastructure. So if we're going to look at what water, cleanliness, or pollution, or where people dump in other places, yeah, there's a lot of countries out there without environmental protection agencies and those things intact. That being said, because we consume so much more than the rest of the world, we generally finger point at them while at the same time causing even more problems ourselves. So I would say it's a little from column A and it's a little from column B. And we'll look at like what that consumption looks like to the rest of the world and how they deal with garbage. And in some places it's smart incineration, in some places it's landfill and that type of thing. But so we're dealing with two things. One, we have a great deal of infrastructure. Two, we have a poor track record of participating with the rest of the global community. So, how do we make those align? How do we take our infrastructure and our brilliant ideas and plug them in and understand that we have a place that fits in like with the global community, not just sort of, America on an island to itself? Good. What else? Who else answered this? Possible, maybe, not. and why?
Um,
Go ahead.
Hi. I answered maybe. I think I agree with Abby in that there's like a lot of like technology and like ability there for us to basically like slow it and like put it to an end really. But I think the most major problem that we would deal with as Americans is bureaucracy and just trying to get all these little thingy things passed. And especially now, like I think about that, there's such like crazy polarization right now, and like environmentalism seems to be more of like a leftist issue. In reality, we all live on this planet, but you know, you have to think like Richard Nixon, noted Republican, whatever, started the EPA, but like now it's switched and it's really crazy. And like, I don't know, I just think to like the Paris Climate Agreement, I made this comparison at school when I was still living in, when I was sharing a bathroom with two other girls. Nobody was cleaning the bathroom. And it was like, I was like, Izzy, this is my roommate. This is the Paris Climate Agreement. It's like, you know, we're just because, you know, China's not participating. Now we're not going to participate because they're not participating. It's like, well, we still have a dirty bathroom. So
Sure.
you got to do something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, and these are all issues that we'll sort of touch upon in here, but good. Look, I said it before, if we feel like we can do something about it, then we will. And if we think it's impossible, human beings generally won't. So I'm happy that like all but a couple people are at least saying, sure, let's give it a shot still. I will say this, this recent administration won't even acknowledge that climate change is real. And this is how I start off my 220 class, not attacking this administration, but simply saying that if you're going to be uncomfortable in this class with me talking about it as a reality, climate change, then you need to drop this class right now because it's a scientific reality. Scientific communities, 95, 98% total agreement. Now it's more like, what do we do about it? To me, it would seem to be a shame if we over politicize the very thing that we need to survive, right? Like to me, there's no politics about it. Rich people that are Republicans they drink different water and maybe breathe different air than me, but they still need that, right? You could take some hippie farmer guy that's a teacher. You could take somebody that's far right, far left. We all have the exact same interest in this planet. So I never try and like approach this from a political standpoint. But if you want to know if your representatives are doing the earth right or doing it justice or doing right by it, you just look at how people have voted. It's like no conspiracy. You just look what was up for voting for, how people voted, and what we decided, you know, to accomplish or not or whatever with that. Okay, so we get to be here, right? Climate change is not a belief, it's a science. And there's a lot of organizations and political aspects in the media that would like for it to be a belief and that continue to sort of, I do a whole lecture on climate denial for my 220 class. And that's because there's a lot of resources, time, money, and effort put into denying what any of us in Colorado have a anybody in California, anybody in most of the world has a really good grasp on this, unless you have the money or power to resist the externalities of climate change. Does somebody have a mic? That is the need.
Where did you get this information? I'm like, science.
Sorry, anybody?
Experience, documentaries, pictures
Looking.
of their rivers. Everywhere.
Anybody feel?
Open your
Oh,
eyes.
there. All right, there we go.
I think your mic's on. You left your mic on.
It was on. I muted that mic before anybody said anything that they didn't want 47 other people to hear. Shoot. Anyway, all right, awesome. So when we look at this, we have to understand, like I said before, and I'll go back to, let me go back to screen sharing here. Yep, there we are. All right. It's not a belief. We know the challenges that are facing us. So basically, where do policy, fossil fuel, and I'm not just going to say fossil fuel addiction, how about fossil fuel need, right? Where does our policy, where does what we need as far as energy intersect, and what is good for the environment, right? Where does that intersect? Because basically we're talking here about a culture of consumption and privilege, and how does that shape our natural world? As sociologists, I mean, what you purchase has an impact on the earth. So what are you purchasing? What does that look like? You know, and whether that's growing your own food or whether that's grocery shop, whatever this looks like, sociologists want to know, what is our human impact on the world? Okay. So let's move it here. I'm going to kind of go past this. We understand that it's getting hotter and hotter, and you know, these are all from the textbook, so these are all cited. We know that it's getting wetter and wetter. And I did want to, at least as far as ocean levels, and a thing about ocean levels rising and melting polar caps and things like that. Look, we have been experiencing water privatization for decades. Right now, if we don't have any good plan to clean water, corporations go for it, companies go for it. Somebody collect the water that's melting off of these massive ice bergs and things like that, because it's fresh water. And desalinization right now, not energy efficient, not clean, and not a great solution. So, you know, although I'm against privatization of water in ways that I think regional, you know, folks and countries and municipalities should keep a hold of that rather than privatize it, we also have to figure out what to do with that. So we're going to talk about solution-based, but for now, ecological disruptions, coral reef dieback, wildfires, species extinction. We know all of this. We have agricultural challenges, droughts in some regions, changing soil conditions. We could talk about farming, the percentage of water that evaporates, and how we can water our crops smarter. We also have heat waves, increased disasters, and I have natural disasters here. If we say natural disasters, we're more apt to take that sort of, I don't know, responsibility off of ourselves necessarily. So disasters, and we know that that makes sense, because if you raise the temperature even a degree, or let's say a half a degree, it's quite a bit to raise a degree. We drive those storms longer and harder and more per season. So question, have we had a major success as a global community in regards to fixing an environmental problem? Now, let me look back here real quick. I stopped the screen share for a second. And did I ask this? Oh, we did. I did. Good, good, good. Okay. Now, normally students answer similarly to how you answered. That is, have we had a major success as a global community in regards to fixing an environmental problem? Just an environmental problem. Out of 54 people, 15 said yes, and 39 said no. And in this case, 39 people are wrong, and 15 people are correct. So what is that success? Because now I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, but this was kind of an 80s thing. So I'm just going to leave it out there. Does anybody know what that major success was as a global community in regards to fixing a piece of the environment? Now, almost twice plus what, 40 to 15, so more than that, 3 times said, no, we haven't. So who knows what it is? Because we have. But you might not be old enough to remember this, which is the case with a lot of my examples, and I understand that. Anybody?
I'd argue merely the creation of the EPA.
The what? No, not the creation of the EPA. Not what I'm looking for.
The ozone layer?
Okay, so tell me about the ozone layer. What success did we have as a global community?
There was a whole banning of aerosols and all sorts of stuff that was eating away at it, and now it's slowly getting back to where it was.
And you may or may not remember this term, CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons. And that is the smell to me of slow dancing in junior high. When everybody had the serious Aquanet bangs, right? Like the 1980s bangs. But it was aerosols and detergent stuff and stuff to get your clothes from being wrinkly and hairspray. And so what we did is, and the United States agreed, the global community agreed to stop producing those. And we saw both the holes, because we've got a couple different ozone holes, and we saw within a period of 10 years that start to repair itself. So, you know, look, I think people dwell on the negatives in regards to the environment. But I want people to understand that we have had some success. And if we're going to continue to make, like, you know, positive impacts on the environment, we can't just think that it's been all failures, right? Because it hasn't been. As a global human community, we have looked at a problem, identified it, and done something about it. And again, I fail to see how this is a political thing. My grandpa, who is a GOP Republican, gave to every single GOP candidate throughout his whole life. He also was important with getting farmers loans. He was a banker and thought that issues of the environment were really, really important. So not every Republican hates the environment. Not every Democrat is a tree-hugging hippie. We need to get back to a place where we were 30 years ago, where people were working across the aisle to make sure that we can get this, like, something accomplished that's a big thing, like what I was just talking about, right? Yeah, okay, good. Let me get back here to share the lecture. Great, okay, so we looked at that. So 2 ozone problems. Upper atmosphere ozone protects health and human life. We understand that. I believe most people understand that too much ultraviolet light leads to increased rates in skin cancer. Now, if that was 10%, if it was 5%, there's still people dying. It's important. But if in a period between 94 and 2001, which is only 7 years, the skin cancer rates went up 66%, that's a large enough number for us to look at. So yes, we reduced CFC production. Yes, we know we can work together as a global community. And so associated with ozone would be, fossil fuel burning combustion, creating dangerous smog. And some of that's photochemical smog. 2006 study showed that over 100,000 deaths each year from photochemical smog. So, it's still a big deal. That's why we look at this. Particulates and acid rain, going to go through that. Again, threats to land and water. We are finding out that farmers' crops, the percentages of those yields are going down over the last decade and will continue to do so. Some of that is salinization because we have so much heat and we water, and then salt builds up, or maybe we're doing a monoculture type thing where we're not planting and rotating crops. So loss of agricultural land is a big deal when you have to feed 7 billion people, right? Okay. Water is really important too. Sorry about how this reformatted some of my pictures. But food supplies are poisoned, deregulated, genetically modified, and made of non-food elements. Yes, the FDA and USDA allow a certain amount of non-food ingredients into our food. We have to look at what that looks like, but certainly we're examining our food supply and our water supply closer. Municipal drinking water has almost no regulation on the federal level, so they've left it to the state level. So a lot of production of things like bottled water are basically, it's not like Everest comes from the top of Mount Everest, or Dasani is some sparkling clean like filter water through some fresh spring. It's bottled in municipal plants in places like Corpus Christi, Texas, in Ohio, and you name it, and it's basically tap water or faucet water. So when we look at the price of bottled water, we also have to look at, is that really worth it? If it's got arsenic in it, if it has lead, if it has toxins. And right now, our leading water experts, and I've talked to the person who's responsible for the water up at Horsetooth and the water here in Fort Collins and Loveland as well. And really the challenge to these folks is that we can get out some lead, some arsenic, but scientists are unable to get out really the vast amount of pharmaceuticals. So if we've looked at pharmaceutical use over the last decade or two, it's up 100% plus. That's going into our water systems. And that is what we're finding out is really hard to filter out. So we're finding people that are not using birth control, that cannot have kids. We're finding fish hermaphroditing and things like that. There are externalities and prices to pay for not keeping our water clean. Now, why is this important? Because 1% of the world's water is fresh water and suitable for drinking, and less than that is actually suitable for drinking. So 1% of the world fresh water, less than that, not poison, okay? Well, what's that matter? Well, you and me, right, and everybody in this class, our existence gets real short without access to water and safe water and fresh water. And that's, again, if we look at other countries, one of the reasons that the United States has such a huge advantage is infrastructure. Having access to clean, safe water is important. That being said, we don't know how much we have. Underground aquifers, we have no idea how much is there. We know that we're losing a lot with the melting of ice and polar caps, like I said before. So you combine that with the fact that water rights are prominent around the world, and a lot of that is getting privatized into corporate control. Nestle is a big water corporation. And then you combine that with the fact that our population is rising. Okay. You know, one of our major concerns here, and if we were to put all this across the board, mass extinction and air quality and food and you name it, to me, water is one of the biggies. I could spend, you know, we could spend a whole semester looking at water and water rights and the importance of this. If you ever get a chance, there's a great documentary out there called Blue Gold, which is free on a lot of platforms, which talks about that very thing. Okay. All right, species lost. We understand that we are in the 6th greatest mass extinction, and it's important for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons that it's important is, you know, because we have something like a whale or a turtle that doesn't just have 100 years of DNA, it's got 300 or 600 million years of DNA. Wiping not just the larger animals or biodiversity pieces off the face of the planet is equally as distressing as wiping out the small ones that we have no idea about. And that is happening at a dramatic pace. So it's like a ladder, right? And it's a quick analogy, but if you've got a river, the more diversity, the better. Human beings, the more diversity, the better. You take a couple of those things out of the chain of a river, and suddenly that river isn't functioning like it should. And whether you're a hardcore conservationist or a fisherman like my dad and I, you want the conditions to be present for that river to be able to provide, whether it's recreation or whether it's sustenance. Because when my dad and I go to the Fox River, we fish for catfish, we let them all go. But there are people that are fishing there every single day on the river for dinner that night. So it's important that we look at that river and how that river can be poisoned and is by the farm operations that spray the pesticides right along it. So this isn't just, again, a Democratic or Republican issue. Who likes to use rivers? Who needs water? We all do. All right, so these are issues that impact absolutely everybody. My students didn't used to know about the Pacific and Atlantic garbage patches. If you don't know about that, briefly, we are talking about, and this is multiple areas the size, twice plus the size of Texas. This is 10 years old. So where the world's currents converge, we have these giant areas of garbage and plastic. And so our largest garbage dump in the world is not on land, it's in the water. And again, like our prisons, out of sight, out of mind. Like a lot of our pollution, out of sight, out of mind, right? If it's not impacting certain people in certain communities, we might not do anything about it. So another piece, and I've got friends that live on Kauai. They've built a beautiful home there. They've been there like 20 years, you know, but they say that walking on the beach is tough there because so much plastic is washed ashore. And that's like in Colorado, you leave a Frisbee out in your backyard for the summer and it's poof, right? It gets so dry and so crispy and it shatters into pieces. We know that that's bad for biodiversity because they're eating that, whales, turtles, you name it. More importantly, it's impacting where we live as well, right? So if we needed another reason to motivate ourselves, here's another one, okay? Okay. Go to the global population clock. It's awesome. There's a whole site that shows you, hey, and we got another baby. That's a baby boy, and that baby's born, and then, oh, grandma's on her way out. Grandma's on her way out. No, oh, but we've got another baby born, and then another baby born. Oh, and it's finally grandma's time. I love you, grandma. But no. And if you watch, it's like coming in and out for births and deaths, and there are many more births, right? We have a massive global population increase, and it's not recently. It's from the beginning of time, right, until we got 1 billion people. And then it only took a short while later to get 3 billion. And I think that while John F. Kennedy was president in the 60s, we had 3 billion people. In about 40 years, we doubled that to 6 billion. And now we are looking at 7 plus. So what does that matter? Well, that's 7 billion people who need water. That's how the first thing, that's 7 billion people that need food. You know, that's 7 billion people. And if we look at throughout time, this is why I look at it, because it's like something that goes here, and then boom. And we already know that human beings, if this was like sort of throughout history, showed up at 11:59 and 59 seconds. We really haven't been here that long necessarily, right? All right. Who's ready to live in Mad Max world? Or that's better than Water World, which was a horrible movie. I don't know. Sorry. So who's that guy? That was it's the same guy from Dances with Kevin Costner. That's a pretty bad movie. Anyway, so here's another chart: world population growth throughout history. See a little dip there for the Black Death. Anyway, okay. Whew, that's a lot. We're gonna keep going. Don't worry. It's just we're like at halftime, so stretch your hands, get up, move around a little bit. It's a beautiful day on the farm. I'm looking out here. Chickens are everywhere. I don't seem to see any. Doesn't seem to be anything amiss on the farm today, although the coyotes and the foxes, they're out. All right. So when we talk about environmental justice, what we have to understand is what comes downstream isn't equal for everybody, and I mean that literally, right? Some people have enough power, money, or access to resist the externalities of climate change. Maybe that's building in a place, you know, that's on the side of a mountain. Like when I look at some of these places in Colorado, and my grandma's from Evergreen, so it's always like mind-blowing. I'm just guessing that some people either have a helicopter or they don't need to go anywhere pre-COVID for a job every single day, because how would you get down off that mountain and back? But some people can resist the impacts of climate change, but that is getting less and less and less possible. So, you know, now we start to look at this. This is, wow, a historical picture from my hometown. I'm from Freeport, Illinois. I've talked to you about that before, a couple hours outside of Chicago. This is Burgess Battery, and it was a dry cell manufacturing plant. We know, how many people here have a box of batteries? Maybe not a lot, but I certainly do have a bunch that I want to throw them away, but I want to know that they're going in a responsible way. And dry cell battery manufacturing is definitely one of those toxic pieces. So they finally retired this place or shut it down in 1989. And there were concerns, environmental concerns ranging from underground storage tanks, cyanide plating, and residue asbestos into the insulation seeping, and lead seeping in containment units into the groundwater, and certainly contaminated soil. Now where is the trash dump, water, or treatment plant in your neighborhood? I guess I should say in your town, because we know oftentimes they are in communities that are more impoverished. They're literally on the other side of the tracks, at least in Freeport, Illinois, the poor side of the town, which is poor white or poor people of European descent, poor African American. That is literally across the river where they built the old flower plant. When you do that and you shrink the size of the river, then it floods. So Freeport has been flooding on the east side of Freeport, or the east side of the river where this plant has been forever. And of course, you know, just like Katrina, when a city floods, it's not just flooding like dirt and stuff, it's flooding sewage and contaminants and all sorts of, you know, things like that. Same is true here. Finally shut down this place, and they had to pay to have it remediated because it was in violation of a lot of the Environmental Protection Agency standards. The ground around it, the water around it, it's right on a river, was too hot, right? Too polluted. So they had one company in and try and remediate it. Basically, that process up until the last 10 years or so ago is just to take dirt, remove it from the site, and take it to a community of color or a rural community. Right, so out in the country someplace, which is again where a lot of our landfills and things like that, or waste treatment plants are, particularly, you know, in the Midwest where I'm from, in these rural locations. That didn't work. They got fined. They had to do it again. They did it again. Nothing. Same thing. So they've tried. They paid twice. Finally, they just had to shut down and build a wall around this. But I'm sure if you were to go there, and I obviously I don't know because I haven't done it myself. I've wanted to, but I bet if you were to test, you know, the soil or around the water or the banks of that river, you would still find, you know, residue left over. So as sociologists, we're like, well, why study that? And that's because we want to know who it's impacting. And if it's impacting folks, who is it impacting disproportionately? Like who pays for environmental justice and who has to deal with it more, pollution in their neighborhoods? We know that this follows pretty standard ideas that we've been covering this semester. Those with the least amount of power get the most pollution, right? So those who find themselves living the closest to the toxic output or of our industrial economy are often poor. disenfranchised, people of color. And all semester we've been asking, what is power? How much power do you have? How much influence do you have? What is access? The same thing. So when we talk about environmental justice, we're looking at the unequal distribution of environmental goods and environmental bads. And I had mentioned before, well-to-do, well-connected people generally able to avoid many of, or at least the worst consequences of environmental problems. How? You can shop for organic food. How? You can buy home air purifiers. How? You can have a house that doesn't live in a floodplain, or nowadays, because we know just even if we're talking about the Poudre River or the Big Thompson River, right? You get enough rain in a short enough time, you've taken trees out of there, you've compacted the soil, it's been really dry, and now you've got flood conditions. So where you live, who you are, what is your power and access? All right, so environmental justice, we know, meaning we know, generally speaking, that poor folks are more at risk and receive less social justice. So as sociologists, we don't just look at that and say, oh, that's interesting, right? We want to do something about it. So we ask ourselves, how do we create change? How can we create more equality? Who do we need to listen to so that we can accomplish this? And how can we help people? Real basic questions, right? And I mean, how can we get folks, I mean, if you look at the water situation in Flint, Michigan, the government just decided not to do anything about it. So you get it brought to the forefront. You've got communities of color getting poisoned. And these, of course, are not just entirely communities of color, but these are poor neighborhoods, like I said before. It attracts national attention. A couple years pass, nothing. Very, very little has been done to remediate or change that situation. So how do we create positive change? How do we make sure that in this country, where we have an abundance of power and access and money, that we get that infrastructure, not just to people who are higher up in the socioeconomic ladder, but how do we get environmental justice to make sure that it is a part of everyone's experience, okay? Okay. Environmental justice emerged in early 1990s as a grassroots movement. Sure, we heard a little bit about it in the 60s and 70s and 80s, but not really pushing forth with as much sort of force as this. In 1992, there was a study done that showed that 3% of all whites and 11% of all minorities live within a mile of a hazardous waste facility. Now, Jason, 3% does not sound like a lot until you're the group of people who's in the 11%, at which point it is almost 4 times as much. So would dominant culture be okay with a factor of 4 times that of minority culture being this close to hazardous waste facilities, industrial output of hazardous waste, things like that? And I would suggest no. So even though those numbers 3 and 11% look small, they are still very disproportionate, right? Now, environmental justice is a difference factor, is a central civil rights factor in the United States. I believe this was during the Clinton administration. Executive Order 12898 requires all federal agencies to work towards environmental justice. Why wouldn't we? Now, that's different with every administration, and the amount of, like power and access and money that is put behind that is different for every administration. But why not have federal agencies work towards environmental justice? You see, because all of us in this society suffer if people are getting the really bad end of the hazardous waste thing, whatever, you're living near there, people are not going to work, they're getting sick. That's a stress on everybody. That's a stress on the economy. You're paying money for that. So as a conservative idea, why not make sure that we work towards environmental justice so that we don't have some folks that are getting, hit by it disproportionately, meaning we try and make things a little bit more equal for everybody. I don't think that a lot of people knew this. Did you know this? MLK was working for environmental justice when he was shot. He was actually down working with striking black garbage workers for economic, justice and environmental justice, better pay, better working conditions. I know that we think of, Dr. King as a hero for the civil rights movement, but he was not just concerned with civil rights in a very generic sense. He was looking at a very broad picture. And one of the ways that we deliver equal rights to people is also through what we talked about, and we'll look at here, our environmental goods and bads, right? What are we doing for folks? What's that look like? I think this is cool because sociology, look, instead of going to college to make things that you could understand harder by me, by my, like, making it harder for you to understand. I like, as a social thing, to take things that are difficult and make them easy to understand. So what are environmental bads? I mean, they're hazardous and toxic waste, garbage sites, landfills, hazardous industrial facilities, and they're usually local in their effect, right? Typically local communities that are the least empowered, whether that's class, heritage, nationality. Like I said, a lot of rural locations receive a bulk of these areas. So it has an impact not only where people live, but where they work. Pesticide and food production is a very, very big deal. Those workers have more impacts, and those rates of cancers are, and I don't have anything in front of me, so I'm not going to say 10 or 20 or 30 times, but they are very, very disproportionate. Were you going to chime in and say something there? No? Okay. Anyway, also the United States does a really good job at exporting hazardous jobs. So again, we send a lot of hazardous jobs to places that do not have an environmental protection agency, do not have stringent laws. When our band was making our last couple CDs, this maybe is like a while ago, our guitar player worked at the printing place, and I said, let's print them on recycled paper. And he said, why do you think that's better? And I'm like, because it's recycled, bro. And he said, are you sure? And I said, well, no. And he said, look, I work in printing, and a lot of that goes to China and other places that do not have environmental protection policies, where they're recycling that paper and pushing those chemicals right out into the ocean. So we have to understand, like, sustainability is just a word until we have a rubric and things in place to make sure that we're sustainable, right? I mean, the same is true with recycling or anything else like that. We have to actually look, what does that look like? Yeah, all right, good. And environmental goods. So massive inequalities in the distribution of wealth. It's not minimal. The gaps between those that have the most and the least are getting higher and higher and greater and greater. And that's not just the United States compared to some other country. That's also within countries, right? Poverty is increasing. The gaps between the rich and poorest are increasing. And so I don't ever think, and I believe I've said this before, that things in this culture will be equal. Yes, liberty and justice for all and equality, those are important to us. I don't think that things will necessarily be truly equal. That being said, I don't think that things need to be so unequal that my arms, right, that the gap between the wealthiest and the poorest need to be extended this much. If it's like this, we need to find ways to do this, right? Because this makes everybody more secure. Raise up the folks on the bottom and everybody else is secure. And I'm sure that if you're on the top and you're looking down, you're thinking that you're losing something if these people get a little bit more, but you're not. Your status hasn't changed whatsoever. So do things need to be this unequal, particularly concerning the environment, right? I don't think so. I think that the United States is smart enough, we are capable enough, and we have more than enough resources to make sure that that some people don't have much less justice in our approach to environmentalism, right? I guess that's a way to say it. All right, quickly, we have a pollution gap and a consumption gap. The average person in rich countries consumes 3 times as much grain, fish, and fresh water, 6 times as much meat, 10 as much energy and timber, 13 times as much iron and steel, and 14 times as much paper as the average resident of a developing country. We also have far more pollution. So this is why it's really important not to look at the rest of the world and say, see, those people over there, they're polluting, but we don't. But we do, right? Certainly we do. Certainly we have a role in it. We consume more, we pollute more, right? And also, you know, rich countries are able to externalize, their local effects of pollution because we can export toxic waste. We can export dirty forms of manufacturing. We have more infrastructure, right? So look, where is our responsibility? And I think as sociologists, I think examining culture all semester long, if you have a disproportionate share of the world's goods and you consume a disproportionate share, then you also could bear a larger responsibility. No single person in this class has as great of an impact on the environment as General Mills, right? As the cereal company or whatever, Patagonia, even an organic clothing company. You don't have that kind of impact. So you likely shouldn't have the same responsibility. Yet, when we look about what we can do with the environment, mostly it's like, what can I do? How can I have light bulbs that are better? How can I save water? Look, that's already on many of us in the 7 billion people. Let's make sure that other folks that have a disproportionate share of that pollution as well have a responsibility. And that, to me, sounds fiscally responsible and fiscally conservative. And the reality is here, there is not one economic model that we could look at where we put money into the environment where we don't come out ahead, okay? If you are truly conservative in any way, shape, or form, then you do this Green New Deal. Because the same is true as Katrina. If you had put $10 million into the levees so that they wouldn't flood the city ahead of time, which people asked for years and years and years, you wouldn't have 20 or 30 or 40 million dollars in damages. So every financial, fiscal, responsible type of plan that we could do with the environment makes money and saves money if we invest in it. So when people say that's too much money, it's not, because once you wait till after the fact, that's when it gets expensive. And we know this. So what does it matter about that inequality? Look, people in wealthy countries live an average of 28 years longer than those in poor countries. That might not matter to you if you don't live in one of those countries, but it is an advantage, right? So there's a huge disparity, not just in like food and clothing and shelter, but whether you live at all, longevity, right? And people are having trouble acquiring and meeting their most basic benefits and needs. So I'm not sure, let me stop the share real quick. Do we have responsibility living in a wealthy country to make sure people in the world can acquire these most basic benefits and needs? You know me, I can see this easily as a yes. I can see it easily as a no. Oh, and I did ask this question, good. Do we have responsibility living in a wealthy country to make sure people in the world can acquire or help them acquire the most basic benefits and needs? Now, I see this lots of different ways because I'm a sociologist. I'm not trained to look at things just one way. That's the only way I see it. I'm certainly not trained to think that the world is black or white. Anybody who's told you that is doing you a disservice as a human being. You are many, many things. We have many, many perspectives. So, as a rich country, do we have a responsibility to help those that are less fortunate acquire the most basic human needs? What do you think?
I think that it is kind of, we do kind of have a responsibility to help out like the rest of the world and like developing countries. But I feel like it's kind of nerve-wracking to say like we should help them, because like so many times America is like, oh, we're gonna help these people with this, and then they go in and kind of just ruin things. So like I feel like it needs to be done on more of like an individual scale. Like Bill Gates, and like he created like this whole thing to make toilets in developing countries. Like that sort of stuff is where I feel like we need to put emphasis on like that sort of stuff, but not necessarily say like, as a country, we're just gonna do this all together. I think it should be more of like an individual thing.
Okay, good, good. So, you know, some reasons are not every time that we go in to do something in a, you know, sort of humanitarian way does it work out that way. Or also, let's look at everybody's responsibilities individually. And how can individuals do that? Good. Go ahead. Anybody else?
Hi, sorry, did I interrupt anybody?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, cool. I think about like when Puerto Rico got hit by the massive hurricanes, and like they're kind of a state but not a state, and
They're
really
part of the
what we
United
did-
States.
right? And they
let's
were
let's just clear that up right now.
yeah. And you know, Americans were like, and this isn't a bad thing, obviously, helping people is helping people, but churches were like taking the opportunity to send people down to like rebuild Puerto Rico. And I think about like, that's not what they needed. They needed money to pay for electricity and water, and you know, sure, this one isolated family now has a house to live in, but now they can't afford to upkeep the house, keep the house full of electricity, have
Sure.
water, eat. So I just think about that kind of thing, and I think, I don't know, I think it's interesting how sometimes we confuse the needs between like we get very selfish with like, oh, we're doing a good thing, but it's like not exactly helping.
Yeah, sometimes we can be right on the money in doing the exact right thing, and sometimes uh, maybe that's not where the help is needed the most, right? Good. Anybody else?
Um, this is just one of the ways that you can see it. Like you said, there's many different ways you can view this.
Yeah.
But the first thing that kind of popped into my mind is just um, there's a reason we kind of feel that moral obligation sometimes to help the less fortunate and to help the needy, because I guess you could argue from the perspective that, it's how we got this far is by working together. Like, sure, we've had times where we fought, like back in hunter-gatherer days, there were tribes that fought each other, but ultimately we got as far as we did because we worked together. So I guess you could argue that you have that obligation and that kind of instinctive feeling inside you because that's how we got so far. That's how we are able to survive, and that's how we're able to work through tough times, is that we can band together and help each other. And if you have more resources, obviously you would give to someone who has less. You can help bring them up to your level, and we can kind of band together and make sure our species can, because we're kind of in this unit, because it just makes me think about the tough times that we're going to have to face ahead. Like, we're running out of resources, we have too many people, so we're going to need to work together if we're going to survive.
Absolutely. Good. Collective action and collaboration is indeed our highest form of survival, right? Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else?
I would say I have a pretty different opinion on this one.
Good. I'm fine with that.
I feel that as America, a rich country, we have no obligation or responsibility for any other.
Oh, hold on. I'm going to pause for just a second. All right. I think you might have lagged a little bit.
The right to.
Can you go back and say that again? You were frozen up.
Yes.
Sorry.
So can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. So as a rich country, I feel that we don't have any sort of obligation to do anything. We don't have any obligation. We are not required, but that doesn't change the fact that it's the right thing. So, like, I feel like people are looking at this as, like, do we have to or do we not? And I feel like we absolutely do not have to, ever. But it's still a good thing to do. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Like, I don't think we should feel obligated to do anything, though.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. It makes sense. Good. Anybody else? And here's one thing that I didn't hear right now that I hear lots from students, and that's like, how about fixing my own community first? Like there's all sorts of things that America or Fort Collins or Illinois needs to do, right? And I think that sometimes people are like, oh, that's not a good attitude or whatever. We should want to help everybody. But there's a lot here, obviously, as well. That's one of the reasons that we're doing the food drive. Do you have to do it? Nope. Can you write a paper instead? Yep. Is feeding people important if you know where your next meal is coming from and somebody that you don't doesn't? Oh, you bet. It's important. You're not obligated, right? Absolutely. Good. And I find that just another thing with your food donations, if you ever go and sit and talk to people, it's much more difficult now. But like, I would go in and do interviews for Soch with folks who are homeless, and it's really amazing. It's remarkable how many of those people are homeless for the first time in their 50s and 60s. I had a guy who was like ex-Army vet, Marine. His wife died. He had like her health care. Something wasn't working for the government for him. She died. He was on the street at 58 in Fort Collins and said, I want to thank the homeless community here because they taught me how to survive. Can anybody here imagine being on the street, right, for the first time when you're 50 or 60 or at any age? But particularly sort of our perceptions of homelessness and stuff like that. So yeah, if you're wondering if your food donation is doing something, it most certainly is. And then I'll have an updated number on that sort of later. All right, I'm going to screen share this last piece here, and then we'll be done. I'll answer some questions. Look, we want to work towards an ecologically sustainable culture. So a way of life that meets the needs of the present generation without threatening the environmental legacy of future generations. How about that, right? Taking care of what you've got, leaving something for other people. We don't have time to talk about all the solutions. Population growth has to be considered. Conserving our finite resources has to be considered. Reducing waste has to be considered. Developing new energies? You bet. Are solar and wind power perfect? Nope. But you know why you can rely on solar? Because when the sun's gone, so's everybody here. Right? And if there's no more sun, we're all gone too. So that's just like a practical reason right there to look at solar. Reconstructing the way we interact and value with our natural world. And how many of these ideas are brand new? Some of them. But some of them are like mass transit, electric trolleys, safe, clean, can get you where you need to go. Look, adobes and like earth ships, that's the way indigenous people were building forever and ever and ever. It's cool during the day, it absorbs the heat, it keeps you warm at night. I mean, literally, much of these things that we look at are not new ideas, but going back and figuring out a way to do them that makes more sense. Dinosaurs dominated, even with their little bitty arms, for 160 million years. Hey, we're only 250,000 years old as humans. So compared to dinosaurs, we've got thumbs, we've got great intelligence. What are the chances that we're going to flourish 160 million years from now, or even 1,000? You can answer this question, right? Yes, maybe, no way. Sorry. I love this Far Side cartoon. It's like they're all out behind the dinosaur school smoking cigarettes, the real reason dinosaurs became extinct. And are humans partially responsible for climate change, global warming? I throw it in there at the end because the answer is yes, 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 and yes. There is absolutely, absolutely, we are partially responsible for that business. And here's what I'm going to break it down. Break it down, Jay. All right, I'm going to break it down. Does it matter? Does it matter? Does it matter if humans are responsible or not? Quit arguing about it. Is there a point to resisting the notion of global warming or climate change? There's not. We have one Earth, and I have to take care of her. Take care of it. All right, I don't want to be gender biased in my last lecture. Just take care of it. Not for any political reason, but because if you want to live longer, you've got a vested stake in this. You need water to drink. You need clean air to breathe. You need communities to function, right? So, Rocky Mountain Sustainable Living Association, an amazing group. And there are so many other student sustainability stuff on campus here. I know that some of these groups, maybe people are just meeting, I don't know, like virtually and things like that. I understand it. But this whole COVID blip, as if like people are going to stop driving as much and suddenly the environment's all repaired, wrong, not happening. And it's a great idea. I want to flip a switch for 8 months and flip that switch on and have everything be cool again and penguins and polar bears are fine. That's not the case. And even more importantly, the little pieces to the puzzle of biodiversity and even ourselves, not fine, not okay. So forget any of the politics. You've only got one planet. I've only got one planet. You know I love Star Wars. So there's a tiny percentage chance that somebody's going to jump ship light speed to this planet and then look for somebody to take to another planet. But probably not during our lifetime, right? So forget about the politics. Take care of the planet. It's important. You need it. Okay. What are the questions that you have? The makeup test is going on right now. You don't have to reply to other people in the social observation. You can just make the social observation. There is no cumulative final. It's just an exam number 4. It opens on the 9th. It's open for a couple days. Each one of my classes might be slightly different, whether it's open for 2 days or 2.5 or 3. I'm okay with that. Just make sure that you know how much time exam 4 is open for. Excuse me, check it out. Because although I am gracious and can extend deadlines, and yeah, I love you and care about your everything, we're getting to the end of the semester, right? And I have already face palmed myself 50 times this morning in unhealthy ways to 50 different emails. Remember, I teach almost 700 students at 3 different colleges, and this morning was like, so that's not you. That's just the universe. All right. But I want you to finish strong. So what questions do you have for me? Now, remember, if you haven't done the extra credit, you could write a 2-page single-space paper on poverty and homelessness. I think it's easier to donate $5, but you're a glutton for punishment. Go on, do it. And I'm joking, right? If you don't have the resources, that's not going to stop you from getting that. Oh, study guide for exam 4. Yeah. Sorry about that. That's the one missing piece to this puzzle. I will release the study guide today. Matter of fact, I've got to go to an appointment. Hold on. Wait.
A little bit.
Hold on. I don't know who's trying to chime in, but hold on. I have something else to do today. So in a couple hours, I'll have that for you. Okay. Sorry. Was it Lily? Sorry about that. Thanks, Robert, for the reminder on the study guide.
It probably was me. You just cut out.
Oh.
You just cut out a little bit when you were talking about test 4. When is that? And is that our final?
Yes, it is. Yep. And I've said no cumulative final. There's no reason for us to cram a bunch of stuff and then just regurgitate it. So we're looking at these 2 chapters, just the chapter on gender and the environment. And a lot of the stuff comes from my lectures and this PowerPoint on the environment. So go back and watch it again, pull some of the big things out. And then when you see my study guide, you'll have a little bit better idea. I think it's great because it's only 2 chapters. So I'm hoping that focuses the, stuff that you have to know a little bit more than 3 chapters. And then again, I want you to learn the right information, write down the right information, and then take that test. And so that you're retaining this information, Other questions? So I think that opens up, Lily, that opens up tonight. What?
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Sorry for any of my in and out. I got 2 kids here going to school in their rooms. Some of my Top Hat question previously answered are showing up as unanswered. Contacted Top Hat. They said only instructors can do anything about it. Man, Top Hat. Shoot, they work for us. You got a problem directly with Top Hat, you send me the email and I forward them an email saying, do this for us. They're a company. We're going to make them work for us. I'm not making them work for me, or I'm not making you work for it. So if there are some questions unanswered, here's the important part. Have you been keeping up? Have you been answering questions? If I see somebody dip out for 2 or 3 weeks and not answer anything, you're not going to get full points. If you've pretty much been on top of it throughout the semester, even if there are some unanswered questions, you're going to get the full points for that. So rather than worry about the logistics, if you do have a big hang up, send it to me. I'll send it to them. All right. Anything else out there? I know we've got some parents listening in today. I think I saw Lily's dad in the background. I think I saw, who else's dad that I've seen a couple parents today. So to all those parents listening, thanks for caring enough about your kids' education to help them out with college. I'm sure that they appreciate all of your hard work every single hour of every single day. I hope my kids hear that while they're learning. Anybody? Any other questions? Okay, so here's the deal. I'm not abandoning you. I'm still here. I'm here through email. You could Zoom me. If you have any questions, I'll put the study guide out later today. I got to go do my stuff for a little bit. My wife's an artist, and she just finished a new print. And so I guess here, I'll type it once. JulieDowningArt.com. There is her art page. I'm not telling you to go buy art, but if you like local art from awesome, empowered women who are just totally cool, I don't know, check out her art page. It's sweet. That being said, take care of each other, be good people, do good things, and reach out, okay? This is just this last week. You got the makeups today. You got the other exam that's open for a couple days, and I do that so that you are free at last during your regular finals week, okay? Like one less thing to stress out about. And if they have already sent out the links and stuff like that for the evaluations, the course evaluations, have they? Have they sent out links for course evals yet? I'm not seeing anybody. Okay, Lily's the only one shaking her head. Great. Fill out a course evaluation because I appreciate hearing about what I could do better, what you liked, whatever. You know, I get 2 kinds of evaluations. Hated that guy, loved this class, whatever, right? Anyway, but I do always, I'm learning from you. So every semester, even though this is like my 15th year teaching, I want to be better too. So props and hats off to all of you. I won't show you my hat head, but hats off because This is the most unusual set of circumstances, and you're all crushing it. All right, be good people and do good things. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Peace.